I think we might be live. Let me just draw it up. And then we'll go from there. Always takes a hot second. There we go. All right, we are in. We are live. So this is going to be just a real quick update. I wanted to just touch base very, very quickly. We're going to sort of forget all the rest of them. We'll mention the leader, Simon, here, I guess, first. But um, Simon, I believe, from what I understand, was hand steering. He was going to try and give it a shot to make it around the horn, but now I think he has decided to hand steer and head for Chile, and ends up probably a pretty smart decision in that point of view. I couldn't even imagine how difficult it would be to be in that place and trying to sort of sort out a steering system or a self steering system. If you were in a place like the trade winds or something like that, that's one thing. You might have time and decent winds and stuff, but down there it's just an absolute mess. So definitely a bit of a nightmare. And if he can get in there real quick and get the parts he needs and then head back out, I'm sure it'll still be a pretty successful trip because I don't see him, giving up or anything like that. I would assume that he'll get it fixed and then get back on his way. So I think that's pretty cool. But the real thing I wanted to just mention, and why this is going to be a quick one, this guy is in a pretty precarious position. And so, this is January 31st here in Michigan. It's 6 p.m. He's just now getting into the thick of it. Or at least feeling the first big squalls and the rains and all that sort of stuff. The wind is kicked up. He's in a position where his next 24 hours are going to be an absolute freaking nightmare. And it's going to be one of those situations where he's definitely going to have his hands full. It's going to be scary. The waves are going to get pretty ugly, and we'll sort of get into why I think that's sort of the case. But he's not in, like, I would say, the worst position, but he's definitely not in the best position when it comes to this system. We're gonna look on Windy because I think it gives a better description of what the heck's going on. So he's right there at that flag at that white point, and or thereabouts. And so essentially, if I just move it ahead a little bit, so right now he's getting winds, pretty strong 30 knot winds. That's chopping the sea up and everything. And that's all from the west northwest. And so he's gonna have a good few hours of winds from that direction. Won't be for another 6 to 8 hours before the wind actually shifts on him. And that's where the problem sort of lies. And it's in these Southern Ocean lows. Essentially, if you're in the middle of it like he is, you're going to get essentially two, almost three different wave trains by the time the system is moving away from you. And that's where it gets pretty scary, because the waves can sometimes, double up on top of each other. One breaking wave can then break in the other direction coming over it. And that's where things get really, really sort of dicey and dangerous. But as it goes on, a couple of more hours, then he's going to get hit by this. And this is where it gets really scary. So look at that wind direction. That's all coming up from almost due south. So that's like 24 hours away. So he's going to be dealing with pretty ugly stuff from the west northwest, and then the west, and then boom, he's going to get smacked by a wall coming up from the south, and that's 38 knots. If you look at the gusts, which I think sometimes in the Southern Ocean it's a little better to go by those to give you a more realistic view. Look at that, 33 knots. That's absolutely that's ugly. That's really ugly stuff. That's like bare poles and or at least, tiny storm jibs, sheeted amidships, maybe even depending on what his style of boat is and what he likes to do, maybe having a drogue behind you, just to keep the stern of the boat into the waves. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can sort of go about it, but Yeah, that's pretty ugly. Well, we'll go back just to the wind. And so, like I said, getting into 24 hours. Now we're still he's probably still going to be in it because he's going to be moving kind of with it. So he's almost looking actually at almost 2 days before this thing is sort of out of there and out of the way. And then he's going to be left with all that slop and chop. And hopefully he's able to stay out of the dead calm patches to the south there. But because there's almost nothing worse, and I know this one from experience, than going through one of these systems only to be left with no wind at all and these huge rolling swell and big, even breaking waves still in some cases. And there's just no wind. There's nothing you could do. It's enough to drive a person absolutely mad. It's definitely going to be brutal. Sun loves sailing. Shout out. But yeah, I also wanted to, you got to also sort of take into account one of the things that he does have going for him is the currents. And typically down in the Southern Ocean where he is, they're normally going in the same direction as these big systems. But let's just take a look. He does have a pretty strong current down just south of him, but where he's at, it's not too bad. But you can see everything's generally flowing from west to east, and that's good. I mean, that having a current going with the wind can actually dampen it quite a bit. And even that stuff to the south of him that's sort of going in more of a northeasterly direction, when those southerlies kick in, that will help as well to sort of dampen down the waves because they don't want to start breaking and they don't heap up quite so quickly when you're in that sort of situation. Now, those currents can change. They can change very rapidly and start swirling around, but typically, if you have the general direction going the same, in my experience, it's definitely a little bit helpful. So at least he's got that. I mean, I'm like grasping for anything just to sort of feel a little better about his situation. I mean, it's not a hurricane. It's a very standard Southern Ocean low, but it's a strong one and it's an ugly one and it's big enough. And he's in the middle of it. It really is. The point that I think is going to be sort of the worst is when that southerly wall hits him. And you might be saying, like, well, why doesn't he just go into this dead calm area here? One, the shape of this system can change, all that sort of stuff. The waves are still going to be in and around these areas, and that's also a good distance that he's got to get to. So I think instead of, trying to find some little niche that's like a little bit better breeze, it's one of those things where it's storm tactics and survival sort of conditions, trying to make sure, the boat makes it. You don't get rolled, you don't get knocked over. You're trying to be as safe as possible just to get through it and then be on his way. I'll bet he's just thinking to himself, oh man, what about my luck? I heard engine problems too, going to be very challenging. I haven't heard about the engine problems, but to be honest, engines in these sort of situations are almost completely useless. I've been told, there was somebody who told me one time about, he was commenting on one of the videos and it had something to do with, well, when I get in those situations, I turn the engine on and I idle speed for it or something. I don't know. I'd never heard of anything like that. When you're in a severe gale like this, it's all about using the wind, using the waves, using the drogue, which I have no experience about, but I know all the GGR racers definitely do. So, but yeah, I mean, having engine trouble and then having weather like this come in mentally is a pretty difficult thing to deal with because it's like piling things on. And you got to remember, solo sailors, especially isolated down in the Southern Ocean, mentally it's in a pretty fragile place, and the smallest little things can rock your mental state and it's pretty crazy. I mean, I can remember a few little things going wrong on my trip that shouldn't have bothered me one bit and brought me to tears or tantrums, screaming at the ocean and all that sort of stuff. And it's weird. I mean, I've always said being out alone is kind of an emotional roller coaster, but the isolation of the Southern Ocean is, unless you've been there, it's almost impossible to describe the loneliness that you feel down there, because you just know I mean, there is no one who can come and get you. Look how far away he is from everything. Look at that storm coming up. I think this one behind peters out a little bit, so it's not too much of a threat. But yeah, I mean, let's just look at it cycle through again. And boom. So he gets that. He sort of stays on that inside edge, but you'd think that'd be good. But boy, sometimes those wind shifts are absolutely insane. And then that second half, Morticia used to always say that the when it finally shifted to the southwest, that was when it was going to blow the hardest. And I think this case, he's absolutely right on this one. Boy, that's ugly. I would not want to be down there by any means at all. So I guess final notes, just like I said, this real quick little update. Yeah, boy, keep him in your thoughts. He's gonna be having some serious action, and hopefully he makes through it. And this will be a great story for him to tell, for the rest of his life, I'll bet, because it's gonna be pretty wild down there. So, other than that, I hope everybody enjoyed the update. Appreciate all the continued support and everything, and